Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better. I am Jeanne Gallagher, and I'm here with Denise Stegall. Hey, Denise.
Hello, hello.
And we're going to be talking about having a plan. Is that correct?
Yes. We are talking, we've been talking about, um, we're now well into the first part of the year, but we're still talking about resolutions and creating, that theme for the year. And so, we've got this theme, this overarching theme. That's great. What are you going to do with it? Right? So we do need to step back and create a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Why? A plan transforms a resolution into a roadmap. And let's be real. I mean, granted, it's not necessarily a paper roadmap anymore, though I do still have an atlas upstairs. If we're driving someplace, we need to know how to get from point A to point B. One, you need to know where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your theme or the theme for the year. But where do you want to go with this theme? Right. And so you can have, where you are, where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know exactly where you want to go, that's some time to, maybe take a little bit of time to write some of those things down, journal about it. What is it that I want to accomplish with my idea of impact? How do I want to impact people? Right? How would I know that I have achieved that? What are those three things? And I always recommend three, no more than three, right? Your brain can't think of more than three, right? So I think that's really important. So you have where you are today, where you want to go. How are you going to get there? You need to have a plan. You need that roadmap. And what I think is always interesting is people like, I don't know where to start. You have to start somewhere, right? They always say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with that one step. And that one step can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. It could be the smallest little thing. So impact for me, I want to impact people in a different way. I have up-leveled the conversations I want to have with people, one with you here on Discover Rising Tides, but also on my podcast, right? I know what I used to talk about, but now how do I raise it to that next level? And I'll be honest, the other day I was kind of not solely vacillating. I was procrastinating. I knew I needed to record a couple of podcasts. I've written them. I know what I want to talk about, but why was I like procrastinating? It's that first little step. It's scary. But you know what? Once I started recording, it was me and the camera and just blah, 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 which I can do pretty well.
It is, but you're right. It is that first initial. I find that's a really great analogy for everything. I find that with my to-do list. When I start my to-do list, I look at it because I set it up the day before. So when I know that what I'm going to do is written on paper and I know, and it's numbered, I know where I'm going to start. It kind of happened this morning. I looked at it, I'm like, I don't really want to do any of that. So I have to pick something that I want to do to get me started. It's like that warm-up round. And then once I get into a groove, then I'm good. But but you notice that with anything, whether it's exercise or changing your eating habits or anything that we're talking about, it's that first initial start that's hard.
Yeah. And think about it, they could be that start could be the simplest thing. So you want to lose weight, feel better, drink a glass of water, 8 ounces of water the first thing you wake up in the morning. Do you know how many people are dehydrated all day long because they don't drink enough water? Like 90% of people. Guys, that's crazy. All you need to do is start your day on the right, that right foot. When you get out of bed, 8 ounces of water. You'll actually notice how different you feel. And was that really hard? It's not really hard. It's just a matter of, like you said, like we we're saying, just taking that first step. And I think, I always talk about, the plan, prepare, right? And prioritize. Prioritize and then prepare. So this is just something that we need to go back to and, prioritize. What are the 3 things that we want to accomplish, and how are we going to do that?
I like
That
that. And
is,
I think 3 things makes it simple, because when you're thinking about changing your habits and your patterns, that is so broad and it's so overwhelming, but you have to identify it and simplify it.
yes. I think, one of the other reasons why I don't love this concept of the resolution, and I like the theme, because resolutions focus on fixing something that's not right, something that's broken, something that's wrong, right? This concept of the theme and taking the steps to get to from point A to point B in December of 2025, right? Because it's a yearly theme, unless you decide to do it quarterly. I have a client who's doing that. Um, it's really about growth, opportunity, and fulfillment. And for so many women in midlife, we are struggling with the fulfillment piece because we're taking care of everybody else. We're doing all of these other things. Now we just have these 3 things that we're going to work on for us, whatever they are, right? So it's not about fixing you. You're not broken. It's just about growing. It's about doing something a little different. Maybe it's healthier habits. Maybe it's setting better boundaries for you. Whatever resonates with you, that's going to make you feel fulfilled, feel like you have purpose, and really have control of your life. And that is really, to me, is kind of the bottom line, is feeling like you're in control. So build some habits that align with your values and your theme for the year. And we'll see where we go.
Wonderful. And transform that resolution to a roadmap.
Yes.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank
Hello, everyone. This is Jeanne Gallagher, Discover Rising Tides. And I want to just take a moment to talk about my friend, Denise Stegall. I am honored to call her as a friend, and I'm so grateful that she gives us her insight during our shows, each show, and talks about healthy living, eating real food. You hear Denise say, eat real food a lot. Well, she means it, and she knows what she's talking about. She is an amazing healthy living coach, curator at Living Healthy List. And if you ever have any questions about what is real food, why does it matter? How does that apply to me? How do I change? What do I need to do? How do I even create a healthy living shopping list? Make sure that you call her. She is your healthy living coach. And you can find her at healthylivinglist.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better. I am Jeanne Gallagher, and I am excited to introduce you to Dana Zellers. Hey, Dana, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm excited for us to get reconnected here. And Dana is an executive coach, and I'm going to have you give a little bit of your bio. Dana and I met each other a few years ago through Caffeinated Connections and Fred's networking group, and we reconnected again, which is really, really great. And so, Dana, give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So my background is I sort of grew up in advertising and technology, and I, like many people, loved huge parts of what I did, but was a little overwhelmed by the endless demands and so much of my job that wasn't really the part that lit me up. And so I started looking around a little bit at other things and got a little more aware of coaching as a pretty new and growing industry. And so I went and got my certificate thinking this would be a great complement to a lot of the things that I do. And I fell in love. I had spent most of my career telling people what to do. And coaching really gave me the opportunity to learn from people what was best for them and helping them on that path. And so I am privileged to be able to be working with a lot of the people that I used to work with professionally, with a lot of the problems that I used to suffer from. Smart, driven people who just are looking for better life balance, more recognition at work, learning how to be a better leader, all of those things that really make up a full and happy life, as opposed to waiting for work to be done to finally start living.
Oh, I love that. And that's a great analogy in the part of the waiting for work to be done piece. It- that happens. It just, it's, it's almost like the frog in the warm water. It just happens. And then all of a sudden you realize that that's all that's everything right there.
Thing. Yeah, it's so challenging and it does happen to so many of us. We don't notice when we're in those surroundings that
Hmm.
suddenly the late nights become a little more frequent. The
Hmm.
being on our devices 24/7 becomes something that is sort of expected and that we are encouraging as much as other people are encouraging it from us.
Hmm.
And we need to take back control and figure out, okay, life balance, yes, work is one of the pieces in our lives, but how do we create the life that we really want, with work being one of the ingredients?
Yeah. And we're going to get into that and really deep dive into that piece too. But one question that I have, and I've talked to a lot of people and conversations similar to this and the transition from corporate to being self-employed. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. I had spent maybe 20, 25 years as more of a consultant and a
Hmm.
contractor in some of the roles that I was. And so I kind of already thought of myself as self-employed because in a lot of
Mm,
ways I was. But when I decided to really hang up my shingle and move into coaching, it really was a bigger piece of business than I think I knew I was getting myself into.
hmm.
And all of those things that I was avoiding professionally in my corporate career of being on all the time and working all the time and not having that life balance, I was suddenly putting on myself. There
Hmm.
is always something new to learn and to do. And now I'm serving clients under my own name. And there's a pressure that, I sort of felt to be able to do that and be able to do it right,
Hmm.
all of the time. And so that transition was, again, it was a little more challenging than I thought it was going to be. And so I have tried to practice what I preach, um,
Exactly.
and get back to that point where, okay, what are the most important things for me to be doing? Where can I get support?
Hmm.
How do I want to craft this part of my professional career so that it supports me in the life that I want to live?
Yeah, because you set these expectations of being all encompassing as a self-employed person. And the definition of that is exactly what's happening in the corporate world. And you're trying to, I honestly didn't think about this until you said it, but you're trying to help people avoid.
Right.
And when you are starting your own business or when you're talking with people that are self-employed, that's all they do. And I've struggled with that in the past and then realized that at a certain point, it's really okay if you can maintain that level of your work living or that level of success that you have in your work to not have to work as hard at what you were doing. And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things I like about being self-employed is that do have a tremendous amount more flexibility with my schedule.
Oh, totally.
And so being able to take advantage of that, for example, so that I can do things during a work week.
Hmm.
Um, and it does mean that sometimes I work on a Sunday
Hmm.
because I want to get things done. But being a little more conscientious about crafting that with intention, as
Hmm.
opposed to just kind of never stopping thinking about work and always having that be a part of what I'm driving towards to be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's a really an important message for people that are self-employed, that when you close your office door, when you're done for the day or whatever your day looks like, then you need to be done. And so
Yeah,
you can move on to the other parts of your life that should be more enriching.
totally. I mean, I think one of the things that we focus on is the amount of hours, but it's also that quality time. So if
Hmm.
you're ending your day to spend time with your friends, your family, to rest and relax, and you're not really having quality time doing any of those things,
Hmm.
then okay, well, it's there are other ways to make some tune-ups so that the time that I'm spending there is, I have unplugged, I have kind of closed that door and let those things go, because that is just going to make me come back that much more engaged and ready to work when I come back. But if I don't actually get any rest when I'm in my downtime, or the things that really bring me energy, then I'm going to come back depleted instead of ready to go.
Do you think that experiencing this in your business for yourself has really either changed or modified or enriched how you are having conversations with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, that idea of it is a combination of other people asking us to do things,
Mhm,
but also what we are expecting of ourselves and how we're
mhm,
structuring our lives and our days,
mhm,
that becomes so true. I think that a lot of us, again, in our professional setting, we feel like we don't have control. We feel like we don't have the ability to do those things. And I think by realizing that that line is a little bit more blurred than we think it is,
mhm,
for me, knowing that I have to put control in my own personal life helps me reinforce a lot of the tools that I work with my clients on. In,
mhm,
again, being successful, being able to be responsive to leaders who are asking of things, but still figuring out a way to make it work.
mhm. Exactly. Yeah. And so, what type of clients do you typically work with?
Yeah, so I work with mostly people who are at the sort of midpoint in their career, I would say. So people who are either looking for forward to retirement and thinking like,
Mhm,
I don't want to keep up this pace. How do I find a better balance for that?
mhm,
A lot of people who are working those long hours and still aren't getting the recognition that they
mhm,
expect, or the promotions or the dollars that they are hoping will follow. And then also people who are stepping into leadership positions and maybe aren't getting the support they want at work. So again, we're all sort of hired at a task job where
mhm,
we are hired because we are skilled and very qualified in one thing. And I think as we rise up in an organization, the demands on us really change. And the
mhm,
way that we work needs to change with them. And a lot
mhm,
of times we're just not given that skill set.
mm. And that can also, so let's see. I was going to ask you a question, but then what you said prompted something, and I need to not ask the next question. So the the not given the skill set is where I was really stuck on, and that's interesting. So as people are promoted and they're working or they're switching over, it might not be something that they've had necessarily direct experience with, but they're managing people that do have experience there. That can also provide some challenges too. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if you think about, some people naturally they're leading a project, but they're
Hmm.
not used to managing people. A lot of times when we get promoted, we are suddenly managing people. We're also dealing with other teams. I usually
Hmm.
work with people who are kind of medium to larger sized organizations. And so they have a lot of different stakeholders within the organization. And so there's a lot of differing agendas that they need to figure out how to deal with. Managing up to your boss is a
Hmm.
skill set that people need to learn. And so again, sometimes we have a great manager who just happens to be skilled in helping us learn those things. Sometimes our organization offers us great resources, but more often than not, it is up to us to identify what is missing and where we get that support. Whether
Mm.
that's, hiring a coach, whether that's just doing reading, listening to podcasts, things like that, where you get that information and putting it into practice. I think my biggest mistake is one that a lot of people suffer from in the organization is where, I work with so many smart, amazing, skilled people, and what they've done to get them to this point has been successful. But the old expression, like, what got you here won't get you there,
Mm.
is really, really true. And there is a new level of learning that people need to be, again, really intentional in taking on themselves to figure out, okay, how do I then create what's going to be successful at this level?
Mm. And so do you see or do you hear from people certain or what should people think about if they're in that mid-level or in that corporate environment? What would be triggers or messages or realizations that maybe I really do having a coach working through this would be super helpful?
Yeah, I think one of the most common themes that I hear people say when they're ready is they're spending their entire day reacting to things,
Mm.
and all of the things that they have planned for what they want to focus on doesn't come to fruition. And so because of that, it becomes this like downward spiral where I'm reacting to things all day. I don't have time to lead my team. I don't have time to spend building relationships. I don't have time to learn these new skills that you're telling me that I need to learn. And so how do I reformulate things so that I can figure out what I'm missing? The other common trigger that people come to me with is I get a lot of spouses who are tired of their partners always being on the phone, always working late, not being there for their kids' recitals, soccer
Oh,
games,
wow.
things like that, that they really want to be a part of. And yet work always seems to take precedence and they don't want it to. And so that can be a point in people's lives where they realize, okay, maybe I need some help to kind of get this back in the right set.
And that's where the balance piece comes in, because if you're feeling that you're always reacting to situations, or you're just feeling like you're not meeting the marks in those different areas. And I love the fact that you mentioned relationships, because the relationships with the people that you work with are so important, but that's
Absolutely.
also so easy to exclude from the to-do list, if you
Yeah.
will. But all of that does affect your mental balance as well, so that that feeling of being overwhelmed can overtake, and then it's just continual slow downward spiral.
Yeah. Everybody thinks like, oh, after this next big project or after these next couple weeks, after this, after that. And it's not coming. No, there's a new tidal wave that's going to hit them as soon as there is space open on their plate. And so again, starting to, I work with a lot of clients on like, what are the quick fixes we can do that are going to help you today? As well as how do we start setting up this structure so that long term, again, you're working on the right things. We're starting to put some things in place so that these things don't become fires, and that we're maybe leaving a little room for the things that do come up.
Do you ever find that when you're talking with somebody that they have some challenges carving out the time to have these conversations that are
Oh,
going to make a difference in the end?
yeah, it's the biggest challenge I think that people have. And it's one of the things, not just for spending time with me, but in general, we want to invest in the things that are going to save us time over the long run. Those are the smart things that maybe we can't carve as much time as we want today, but we want to figure out how we start prioritizing those things. And there's kind of two things that I sort of talk to people about. So one is you are making time for something now. So what are those things that you are making time for, and how are you doing that? The other is, if you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow and couldn't do everything on your plate, where is your time best spent? So how are you going to figure out what those key things are? So all of those things that absolutely have to be done, if you couldn't do them and you had to clear your plate, you would find a way. And so how do we do some of those balances? And again, some of the quick fix tips that I give people are like, how do we just carve just a little bit of time now so that we can start to invest in some of these systems that are going to save us time in the long run and pay off exponentially?
I can, after, if I could make a full sentence, would be really great. However, what I was going to say is that prior to being a financial advisor, I was in the corporate world for a really long time, and maybe there's some PTSD still in there from that corporate time, because I can feel that, oh my gosh, I know I should do this, but how am I going to fit this in? But then I can also see that once people get over that hump and they realize this is so important, carving out time becomes easier. And then that gives you the opportunity for them to, once they start to work on that piece, then they can really see how they are more in control than they thought they were.
Exactly. Yeah. The other piece of the work that I do with almost everybody when we start is what I call clarity work. So it's, what is important to you? Where have you been happy? What are your values? What's your vision? What are the things that you want to do? And it's really the foundation for figuring out how you want to be spending your time, because you look at what's important to you and you look at how you're spending your time, and it doesn't add up. So
Yeah.
if you start to prioritize those things, that these are important to me, and again, it's what's important to me, what's important to my organization, what's important to my boss, So really focusing on those things rather than the day-to-day sort of busy work that we find ourselves very much invested in.
And that really does lead towards that clarity work helps you lead them towards the concept of balance
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
balance within work, but also the balance outside of work as well, which is really the whole idea that this conversation is happening, even if they don't realize it.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
one of the challenges I think, when you're meeting somebody new or they say, well, tell me something about you, the first thing that we start to tell them is what we do.
Yeah.
So we identify ourselves with our work versus identify ourselves with something outside of work.
Yeah, it's the most common denominator and just it's like a shorthand. And it's one of the things that when I'm working with people, it's switching from this idea of it's actually not work-life balance, it's
Mhm.
life balance, and work
Mhm.
is a part of that. And that
Oh, I love
may
that.
be, based
Can
on
you say that again? That's really important. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so instead of work-life balance, it's
Mhm.
life balance, and work is one of the components of that.
I love that. That's really fantastic.
And if I'm talking to somebody in a work setting, then sure, we're going to talk about what we do.
Mhm.
But it's not who we are.
What we do versus who we are. It's brilliant, but it's common sense when you think about it, but it's such a needed conversation and to talk through.
Absolutely, because we spend so much time in our work. And we are sort of,
Mhm,
it's a little bit of an American thing, I think, where we are so wrapped up in that as our
mhm,
identity. And
mhm.
I think that's one of the things why a lot of people midlife are coming to me is because they're starting to shift that focus. They're starting to realize that work isn't my identity. And so as other things are cropping up in my life, or I'm losing touch with who I was and the fun I used to have, then it's time to really prioritize figuring out who am I now? Who do I want to be? What is the life I want to craft moving forward? Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
And what are the first steps that you might have with somebody to lead them to this life balance piece?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is a great tool is just doing a lot of reflection.
Mhm,
So looking at where in your life have you been happy? Where have you been frustrated? Those are the things that give you a lot of great ingredients. And then that piece of how are you spending your time now?
mhm.
That is sometimes we think we know how we're spending our time, but it often can be such a great wake-up call. As to when we look at things, I, for example, color code my calendar. And if it's all blue, which is work, then I start to think about, okay, where are the purples in my life
Mhm.
that I want to add in? Where are those things? And it's funny, I read a study that said if you have people who have like an after work plan, like
Mhm.
a hobby or a class that they're going to take, they actually feel like they have more time than people
Mm,
who don't.
really? Because they're doing something that fulfills them.
They're doing something that fulfills them. So, how do we start to lean into these things that not only give us those things that we want, but actually start to make us feel like we have more time?
Mhm,
Spending time in nature
mhm,
is one of the things that gives us energy. It doesn't drain us. So it's not just the quantity of time we're spending, it's the amount of energy that we're actually using or gaining. And
mhm.
so having that as like an extra valve that we can use again makes us feel like we start to have more balance, even if maybe we are spending more hours in one area than another.
It's interesting that going outside has to be a conversation.
Right?
But it's easy to be, but if you think about it, if you have so many work demands, it's easy to put yourself second, third, or 25th on the list. And when
Absolutely.
you're 25th on the list, there's only so many pieces, there's only so many things that you can fit into that small little
Yeah.
time frame of personal time. And as you're talking to people and you're working them through the steps and you're working through their clarity and helping them create their new vision of themselves, what transformations do you see in them? And then also, how does that ignite them to take further steps? And then how do you incorporate those outdoor suggestions to them?
Yeah, no, it really is one of those things that I am astonished at how frequently people tell me that they feel like they have more time.
Mhm.
We talked about that starting point where like I don't even have time to meet with a coach. Like that is not something I have time in my schedule. But by meeting with a coach and doing some other work that we're doing, it's like suddenly I have more time because I know where I'm spending my time and I'm removing some of those things that are
Mhm.
taking other time. The other piece of that we really talk about is again, when we're being really intentional about how we're structuring our day, how we're structuring our week, what we want to accomplish during the month. A lot of the times when we're talking about what we want to do in a year or a month, we come up with these things. I love hiking. I love getting out in nature. I love traveling, all of these things. And yet when you look at your day and your week planning,
Mhm.
where do those fit in? And
Mhm.
so by being really intentional about the things that you want to put into your life, you mark those on your calendar. You figure out the time that those are going to happen. So many people that I talk to, it's incorporating a walk in the middle of their day
Mhm.
can start to create that transformation where it's like, okay, I mean, we've all been at that point where we're writing an email or a document and we're just getting slower and slower. And things are just more challenging for us to figure out. But by getting up, taking a walk
Mhm.
outside, we're getting physical movement, we're getting nature. Maybe we're connecting with a friend while we're doing that. But we're doing those things that take us away from that headspace that we were in, get us into our bodies and get us engaging with nature. And then we come back and we are done
It's refreshed.
those tasks that we were talking about. And so the more that you can put that into people's awarenesses
Mhm.
as to, you're not just because people feel selfish when I tell them,
Oh, right.
and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, yes, this is for you, but it's a win-win because this is actually going to improve the work that you're doing by investing that time in yourself. And starting to shift that perspective can
Mhm.
be really, really integral in getting them to the point where they're starting to incorporate more and more of those things.
Mm. That selfish piece is important, I think, right? Because it's easy to do, maybe I'm speaking for myself. It's really easy to do something for somebody else. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to work your personal things into your schedule when you are in a high demand situation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of the reasons why I often approach people from that sort of duality.
Mhm.
So we are not just talking about you spending time on yourself, although that alone is valuable and important, but we're not always there right away. So realizing that by investing in yourself, you are actually investing in your relationships to the people that are important to you. That awareness can be really important.
Mhm.
The same awareness happens at a company level. So when I'm talking to organizations about investing in their team, I am doing that because by investing in your employees in things that are going to make their lives better, they actually are more productive members of the
Mhm.
team. They are more engaged. They are more creative thinkers. So all of these things that we want from people, because I got to tell you, organizations are not adding more and more resources to teams, and they're asking for more and more results. And
Mhm.
so that means we need to get a little creative
Mhm.
about how we are working with people. But if that's again, if it's a win-win, if I'm investing in the goodness of people and I'm getting them more engaged and more creative in all of those things, I'm also stopping turnover because suddenly they're thinking that this is a job that they can continue in. This is
Mhm.
a role that they can keep going. And so we're getting people who are more productive, who are able to be more successful in those roles and are happier, healthier, and can imagine that this is a role that they have until retirement
Yeah, and feeling appreciated.
and feeling appreciated. Like
Mhm.
we're humans, we are not just cogs in a wheel.
Mhm. It is so true that at a certain point you can only work so hard for somebody else, and when you're not feeling that the work that you're doing has value.
Yep.
But it's also very hard to ask for the value.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you look at the studies again and again show some really common themes for how people feel appreciated and valued and a part of the organization. Yeah, money is a part of it, but it's actually not the only part. So having people give you feedback on a regular basis, not just waiting until your annual review, but feeling like you're getting that input, having people explain, like when we go back to that clarity piece, why what you're doing is important to the organization. Again, it's not just some miscellaneous task that I'm having you do. Giving people autonomy and the ability to kind of manage some of their own decisions and things like that. Again, all of these things really are shown to really increase the engagement, increase people's sense of satisfaction, having the ability to do those things. And again, they're pretty simple steps when it comes from leadership. And yes, we don't all have great managers. We don't all have people who are aware of that. And so that's why us being aware of those things also helps us to, again, this goes back to that we have more control than we think we do piece. So going into our one-on-ones with our managers and asking some of the questions, asking for some of the context, asking for, don't ask them not to micromanage you, but saying, great, I'd love to run with this. When can I check back in with you? How can I follow up with you on that information? There's a lot of ways we as individuals can really kind of create a better experience for ourselves, even if other people aren't aware to create that for us.
I love that. And so tell me a little bit, or tell everyone a little bit about your boot camp.
Yeah. So one of the things, again, that I love, again, I've talked a lot about this clarity piece. And so what I like to call Clarity Boot Camp is really the one kind of piece that I think is valuable for everyone to go through. And again, it's 4 sessions with me. So we'll spend a chunk of time together, but there's also some workbooks that I have people do some of those pieces on. And I've mentioned a few of these things along the way. So the first one is reflection. Again, where have you been really satisfied, happy, where not so much? Your values. So based on those really, really happy points, really friction points, those are often triggering to what's important to you. And once you can identify your values, your decisions will be so much simpler. The choices that you're making for how you move forward and where you're maybe missing a few ingredients that you want to start incorporating in different ways. From there, we figure out what that vision is. And that vision is expansive, but it's also a really good thing to play around with. So based on our values, based on what we want, there's usually one way that comes to us that we want to create that reality. But by playing around with it and really brainstorming, what is it about that experience that is really exciting to me? What could a different way for me to get that excitement be? Opens up way more opportunities in our future than we ever knew were possible for us to create a happy life. And then the last piece that people really like to look at is, up until now, we've been looking internally. So what do I know about me? What are the things based on my experience that are really important? And this last piece is, what gaps do I have? What don't I know? And so from here, we want to look at, how do I try something on so that I practice the experience? How do I do research into a topic that's something that I don't know? Or how do I talk to somebody who has this experience? This is one of the most valuable steps. If I want to go into a certain career or, do something like that, talk to somebody who's done it. There are tons of people out there and people are so generous with their time. It can be really valuable. And by going through that process in a structured way, again, people find clarity, they find time, and they find ways to bring the joy back into their lives.
I love that. I love that. And so let's talk a little bit about you. And I think I read someplace that you won some, I don't know, some award. What was that?
Yes, no, I was so grateful. Speaking is one of the pieces of that I do that I have been so happy to do. Most of my coaching is one-on-one, and so speaking lets me talk to a group of people, talk about some of these things that I think, again, are tools and techniques that people can take today. And I was so gratified to receive recognition for the leadership and the work-life balance work that I do in bringing that to the masses. And speaking is one of the things that I find really fun, to be able to engage with a lot of people who maybe just aren't as familiar, or maybe aren't ready to look into a coaching relationship. But again, I can give people really actionable items and insights that they can take away with them right there.
And your award was?
So I was recognized for a top speaker in, again, in leadership and in work-life balance.
Congratulations on that. And it is, speaking to a group of people is so fun because the dynamic of the room really, really carries the conversation.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think there's something about the energy of that. And then also really being able to take questions, take some of the things and really customize them to people's experiences. It's one of the beauties of the one-on-one work is that I really can go exactly where you're at and help you figure out those things and test them out and why they're not working. And so having some of that nuance being able to be brought to an audience, and sometimes seeing that conversation with somebody else can be enough to create insights as well.
Fantastic. And so would you summarize in a few bullet points, a few different thoughts or situations where somebody might say, oh, gee, maybe I do need a coach?
Yeah, I think that if you are thinking about quitting your job
Hmm.
and you're thinking this job isn't working for me, but you're afraid that where you go next might not be any better,
Hmm.
um, that is a great time to look at it. Again, the other things that are really common themes is, again, are you spending all of your time working on things that are not the things that you've prioritized? Have you stopped doing things personally? People get to this point where, again, wanting to spend time with kids, having parents who are needing additional time and care, or also people are having their own personal issues and wanting to get back to that point. So I think the work that I do for kind of all of those different issues is really has some commonalities. So in figuring out what is the most important through the clarity work, and then really figuring out a way to structure and be intentional about how you're spending your time to give you the biggest bang for your buck, personally and professionally.
Fantastic. And so, Dana, how do people get in touch with you?
Yes, so you can always find me at danazellers.com. So that's an available space to do it. And of course, you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Right. Dana, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. And I love the part in the beginning you said things that just light you up. And this does light you up. And I can see that. So what a great place to have you making a difference for others. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure, and we could talk for hours. So
Mhm.
I so appreciate your having this space. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. Today's show was sponsored by Seaside Solutions, my financial services company. As a business owner, it's easy to be pulled in many different directions, and often taking care of yourself plummets to the bottom of the list. For me, I find myself outside to reground. My time outdoors helps me manage my day more effectively and be more present for my clients. Through this, Discover Rising Tides was born. At Seaside Solutions, we truly believe that education is the foundation of financial wellness. Our primary focus is to provide guidance that is designed to help you achieve your long-term financial goals and visions. Working with a plan allows space for doing more things that you love, like being outside to make the inside better. If I can help you create or realign your plan, or if you would like to be added to my weekly newsletter, please let me know. This week's topic was 5 ways to set more achievable goals. Your referral means the big, beautiful world to me. And if I can help, please let me know. And thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.